Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started. What's good, Alaska? This is Scott Levesque, and you're listening to the Midweek Edition of the Must Read Alaska podcasts. Hey, I just want to welcome everybody in, and if you could take a moment and just go ahead and give us a 5-star review, that would be amazing. It really helps when people are searching our content that we would populate first. And if you want to take even just another minute or two, if you want to leave us a written review, that would be amazing. We love hearing from our listeners. We love hearing from our supporters and our readers, and that's just one way we can hear from you. Again, it also helps us when it comes to search results. So if you just can take a few minutes before continuing on and listening, that would be great. Like I said, it helps just with individuals searching Alaska politics, Alaska culture, all of that. It helps us in that search results area. Well, today's a special day. It's our first guest on the Midweek Edition, and I am proud to say that I was able to connect with this individual on the campaign trail and had a lot of great conversation. We did a video together. I got to know him a little bit, got to write a story, and really it's an honor to have him here, and that is Representative James Kaufman from the 28th District. Rep. Kaufman, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me on. And just to let you know, I just put a to-do list item on to give you a 5-star review.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You are too kind. Too kind, sir. Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking time. I know things are crazy down there in Juneau, and that's where you are right now. You're busy, doing a lot of things. Obviously, we want to get into a little bit of that. But before we get started, I wanted to kind of go back. I want to reminisce with you, if you will. I wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign trail and a little bit about that in a couple of things. Number one is you ran against during the actual campaign for the seat. You ran against Suzanne LaFrance, and that was kind of the bait and switch candidate that happened after the primaries there. And one of the things you and I talked about was sort of your style of campaigning, which at the end of the day turned out exceptional for you. You won. It was closer at the end, but you won by a little bit over 400 votes. And can you just kind of talk a little bit about that process? How'd you feel now that you're out of it and you won and you're in the position you're in? How did you feel the campaign went?
The campaign was an amazing experience. It was 2 campaigns. We had the primary, so I ran against the incumbent in a primary campaign, and won that with big numbers, and then went on to do the general election, and that was just a continuation of the primary. Basically, I hit the ground running. The idea was to just get out and connect with as many people as possible to make up for the fact that I had no brand recognition at, not being a politician. I didn't have, that to lean back on. So it was just get out and talk to the neighbors, and did it with a vengeance. Hit, thousands of doors and a lot of conversations. And what I found is that there was a great reception. That turned out to be the most rewarding part of the campaign. It was the part that actually kept, to use the term grounded, kept me grounded. You'd have to deal with a lot of stuff in a campaign, but being out there in the neighborhoods talking to people, that ended up being, the bread and butter of it, and that's what kept me going.
Well, absolutely. I know that's anecdotal at best, but talking to some of the residents in your district, one of the things that I heard on a continuous basis is, I heard a couple of things that were repetitive. One was he's just a likable guy, which in politics is great because there's not a lot of love for politicians now. So that was great. And the other thing was he was honest. And again, something you can't really say a lot about, I guess, generally about politicians, at least that's how people look at them. And those definitely were the 2 resonating factors in there. And then I think within that, obviously, you have some subcategories, right? What does that really mean to people? Everybody thinks of honesty at some level and some variance, but what was really interesting to me is your district in the presidential race went for Biden by a little over 80 votes. And you did very well in a district that, in all intents and purposes, was blue. And you're a Republican. You've been very clear about that. And one of the things that I remember talking to you about on the campaign trail is your decision to really address finances and kind of look at what I termed like realistic financial outcomes. And so, in that, I think this is really great as we transition to you now as Representative Kaufman. And can you talk to us a little bit about what that transition has been from campaign to now policymaker, lawmaker, representative, the whole works? How has that transition been for you down in Juneau?
It's been fascinating. It is just an incredible, and when I say awesome, I don't mean it like the Valley Girl usage of awesome, but I mean awesome as in great, magnificent, great, huge, sometimes terrible. To find yourself in a place like this doing what you're doing after you take all the thrust of the campaign and all of that, and you just rush along for all that time, and then at one point you're walking up to a door of your of the previous constituent, because when you get to Juneau, you get the office of the previous no, I said constituent, of the previous incumbent. So you're walking up, you're turning the key in that door, you walk in and you're like, my goodness, this is going to be my office for the next 2 years. And I need to do well with it. And so for myself, since the incumbent that I took out was the previous co-chair of finance, I had this massive mega, this incredible office. It was almost silly. Here's little old me. I'm showing up my first day on the job, and I've got like one of the most coveted offices on the planet. And so I have it no longer as part of the organization. Maybe we can chat about that later, but
Sure.
there's a big shuffle over office space and all that. The whole pecking order thing kicks in, and
Sure.
And so anyway, you work to get here, you get here, and then the enormity of it, and in my case, the enormous office that went with the win. It was just an amazing experience. And then next thing you have to do is start turning all of that into a working, functional concern. And you're doing it concurrent with so many other things that you have to do. You get here, you get smacked with the fact that you've just gotten hired by the state, basically, right? So you have all the state paperwork and all the state, the HR stuff and all of that. You get your parking spot and all the things that go with it. So in the end, you run for all this, and in a weird way, you find out, well, now I'm just a state employee. Even though
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well,
so
sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
Oh, I was going to say, you had mentioned that before, the kind of the weight of the office itself. I mean, and then, like you said, you had the metaphoric weight, and then literally the office, like your physical office at that point was rather large. Talk to me a little bit. I think people, James, one of the things that people loved about you was you've already exerted it, your humility in this. Like, I don't think people understand or can articulate it as well as you just did, the physical weight of that. How has that been as you've kind of navigated through Juneau, the weight of your constituents, the people that elected you? Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
Well, sure. Kind of where to start is the challenge with that question. I guess what you have to remember when you're doing this particular job is that, a typical district, I don't know, somewhere around 17,000 people. And so primary on one shoulder, and then the roughly 700,000 of all of Alaska on your other shoulder. And you've got your perspective that you want to bring to the job, but you have to realize you don't have all the information. You don't know all the ins and outs of how the place works. And you're going to have to, in a very quick way, find a way to make yourself useful and to produce something of benefit to all of those people that have their hopes pinned on you. And so in my case, it really started out with, how can I get to work within our caucus, at first because, and some may not know. So, when we all show up down here, there's kind of there's two caucuses or caucus. You have the one on the left and the one on the right, generally speaking, and you have some folks that swing back and forth in between. And when I ran as a Republican, I didn't want to run as a Republican, as people understand it lately. I wanted to run as one that really kind of tried to do the things that Republicans always talk about and deliver a high integrity version of what Republicans claim to be. And so I got to work in our caucus with the rest of the teammates in there. And at that point, we were around 20, and so we were trying to really work on creating that a high integrity organization where we didn't all have to vote exactly the same way, but in general, our vision of liberty, of being focused on delivering a more efficient government that was focused on genuine priorities, all of those things, that's what we were focused on. Then we could interpret it as we like around the edges. But in general, we were all focused on liberty and a pursuit of a higher value agenda than the normal, money burn programs at any cost type vision. And so much of my day and on into the night, you would be amazed at the level of conversations that we're having about all these things and about how to turn it into an effective organization. And so that was the whole first part of it, and that was intense. And of course, we were hoping to form a majority out of that, but in the end, we didn't quite make it. But what we ended up with was a very strong minority of 18. It was a little bit of a paradox for me that in the media, a lot of the conversation was, hey, these Republicans can't do anything, that they don't know what they're doing. What people couldn't know, because caucus meetings they're confidential, it is the quality of work that was going in there to create an aligned team. And to the extent that you see what we have now with 18 people, that we don't agree on everything, but we have agreement in principle on the core principles of liberty and of delivering value. So it's a different story than, oh, they can't shoot straight. And yeah, we did have some defections, and that happens because there's things that are bargaining chips. There's positions of power. There's an attractive sales pitch that you're not valid unless you go to the majority. But there is a very good job that a disciplined minority can do of trying to help make sure that we're just the loyal opposition. We're not obstructionist, but we're also helping to raise the issues that need to be raised, and that we get value out of the process.
Yeah, you make a great point. It's hard for everybody to be aligned on everything. You mentioned a little bit about what was kind of coming out of a lot of those meetings, and again, we don't know who was talking to who. That's sort of the nature of a lot of this in politics. But did you find any frustrations, or when you were in those meetings? I think a lot of people on the outside, James, looked at it and was, like you said, the media narrative was, hey, these people can't get along. Hey, there's power struggles. Hey, there's this. Hey, there's that. And that's why they're having defectors. In the midst of all that, what you're saying is, listen, there's a lot of intense conversation. We're trying to get on the same page. We may not agree on every page, but the vast majority of this quote book we have in front of us, we agree on. Would you say that in those conversations and moving on forward now, that you guys feel like you're a united group moving forward?
Yes, absolutely. Well, united again, united around principles. Some of us, there's you take issues like the PFD. Some people ran on a full PFD, and you mentioned that people said I was honest. I was honest, past tense, during the campaign. I'm hoping to make that as current. He is honest. I want to keep up with that. So we had conversations about, like, the PFD. Some people ran on a full PFD. Other people in the room didn't, myself included, because I've just told people, I don't know what's going to happen with the PFD, the way we've spent and where we've taken ourselves. So I can't promise that I will deliver a PFD. We've got a big fiscal problem, and I can't promise that for you. So you've got that range of conversation just about that one issue right there. But yet that whole group of people, we decided to stick together as a minority, which means, and this is where the power thing comes in. So in a minority, there's lesser offices that you get in the minority, less staff, all of that. So you kind of get bumped down a notch. The majority, they get the bigger, better offices, better view, they get more staffing. Staff here is determined by points. So there's a point system. So when you're in a minority, you're on the wrong side of the tracks. And
yeah.
And it shows up in your staffing. And so there's a big shuffle that happens as some staffers move from here to there, following the point system and all that. And, we went through some of that. In the end, you're in your new office, which I am in mine. It's a good one. It's a little smaller than that first big one that I got. but it's a good one. And I've got awesome staff that are just, and that's the untold story too, here in Juneau, of the incredible staff people that are here and the work that they do of grinding through a lot of this stuff to help you stay, or help me in this case, on task while you're off in a committee meeting. I mean, my day is meetings from morning to night now. Some of them are Zoom, some of them are committee meetings, subcommittee meetings. And then, we periodically go out on the House floor, to do that. And so it's just constant, and you couldn't do what you have to do here without the incredible staff. So I just want to say props to them.
Awesome. No, I agree with you. It's funny when you start talking about how the quote point system works, it always reminds me of middle school dodgeball when you're picking teams, that always what it reminds me of. But, talking about reorging and that kind of reorganization process, maybe from a high level, you don't have to get into detail, but what was that like for you? I mean, like you said, you walk into the biggest, most coveted office you have, and then the reorg process happens. That's got to be a weird process. I mean, especially for your first time in Juneau and seeing how everything works, you're learning the organism known as politics in Juneau. Just can you give some of the people the insight on sort of maybe not just generalities, but your feelings on how that all went?
Well, everybody converges down here in Juneau, staff and legislators, or some of the staff people that come down for the session, and it is unformed, so it's the body, but it's not formed. And then there's all of this inside baseball stuff that happens in the caucusing and organizing process. And then at some point, boom, it organizes and you find out what side you're on. And that organizational dynamic is the act of people going from one side to the other to form the majority. And so, it's like, boom, in our case, it was, and then there's various processes that certify that. And so that, takes place by a floor vote that certifies the results of all that. And just to put it in simple terms, and then, okay, you're out of there. So next thing you know, people start showing up and carrying potted plants into your office, and your replacement.
You're evicted.
Yeah, you're evicted. And this was a Friday, and so people started showing up in our office with stuff, and we had kind of casually packed to be ready for this because we knew it was coming, and we were new, so we didn't have a whole bunch invested in our stuff. But so boom, you're out of there. So it was a Friday, and we left our office. We carried our boxes and our stuff down. We moved ourselves pretty much, because the moving resources, they're busy with the higher value targets, right? And so we moved, and we pretty much moved ourselves into our office and got ready. And one of the things you discover is that you have no furniture. That there's a process by which furniture goes with the district, unless furniture was with the special committee that you were on, like finance has their own furniture. And so I was in a finance office. So next thing you know, I'm begging, borrowing, and I might almost say stealing, but I won't admit to that, furniture to get our office going. And that's where some really great folks in our caucus pitched in. And one in particular that just pretty much had furniture extra, and we did a little, I won't even say horse trading. It was just a friendly gesture that she did. Next thing you know, I ended up with some usable furniture, and we searched around for that other staffer that we needed, having lost one, and so boom, we're up and running. But we moved ourselves, and I've actually got a little Facebook post that we were carrying our books and stuff back and forth, and be a post pretty soon, a picture from that point in time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure it's a wild scene. Like that whole experience, I know it's pretty wild, especially for, if you've never been through it or know anything about it. It can just be like, it's a whirlwind, a bit of drinking from a fire hose, if you will.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure. Well,
And
one of the things I wanted,
the job is still going on during all that, right?
yeah, yeah, no kidding, right? So you're doing all that and trying to get your job done. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is sort of where you reside in committee membership. And one of the fascinating things that I saw where you landed, particularly as a freshman representative, is the House Legislative Budget and Audit Committee. Fascinating to me. Fascinating to me for a couple reasons. One is I know you and kind of got to know you a little bit on your campaign trail and what you were really interested in doing, and sort of what you wanted to bring to Juneau based on your professional work experience. But right now, I kind of give me a little bit of insider information as to how you got on the committee, where you're at with the committee, and some of maybe your goals moving forward for that committee.
Well, at one point in our caucus, we have internal processes within the caucus, and I had actually been selected to be on finance, but that the way the committees are populated is, the standing committees is a ratio of the size of your majority minority. So when we lost some members in our caucus, that changed our ratios, and so being the new guy, I fell off of that committee, and so I had already been seen as someone who would do the work that goes along with a finance seat, which it's a tremendous amount of work, just the information processing requirements and all of that. And so I think that helped make the decision when we were looking at these other, because there's standing committees, there's special committees, and then there's joint committees. And so this is a joint committee between the House and the Senate. And basically it's looking at how appropriately the money was used through an auditing process, and what you're referring to from my past. So as a quality manager, I've been trained in auditing. They're not financial audits, but at some point you're looking at data and making sure that it's correct. So I'm very familiar with auditing processes of designing audits, knowing how to execute an audit well, and it's both a science and an art. And so I think it was seen that background was beneficial for that particular committee.
And so you're in committee, and in your mind, what are some of the important things that you can do within that committee right now? Do you have anything that you're, maybe a goal for, your first year, or is that are you just still trying to explore? Because I can totally understand. It's like, hey, we're still trying to explore what's going on down here.
I will very humbly say yes. In that particular committee, I'm in listening mode. It's a unique committee. For instance, in our current caucus in the House, there is, when I started to ask around, is there anyone that has been on that committee that can advise me a little bit? There were no current members that had been. And so it wasn't something that, oh yeah, 20 people here have been on that old thing.
Right.
And so I'm gonna be in listening carefully, studying. It's not a committee that meets constantly. It has a long and infrequent cadence throughout the term. It's one of the committees that meets out of session too. So it's a different kind of beast, and I'm going to spend this early days on it. I'm going to spend just trying to really be aligned with its mission, but I feel I understand that. But more importantly, its processes. It has pieces of it are highly confidential, so it's an unusual committee, and I'm so proud to be on it.
Well, that's awesome. I think, if I'm being honest with you, James, I think it's what you said about doing a lot of listening. I mean, to me, as a person who's an Alaska resident, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear somebody going in there just wreaking havoc. I want to know, like you said, you're learning, figuring that out. So I think that's absolutely phenomenal, and I appreciate that you're willing to do that. I think it goes back to, like I said, I love what you were doing on the campaign trail, and I love what people felt, the humility of that. Like, hey, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I need to know the information to provide at least some solutions, like we were talking about before. So that's awesome. So we're closing in on our. Let's go ahead.
If I can, I just want to mention on that committee, interestingly, there are audits of CARES Act money and where it went. And Alaska has been selected for auditing on that subject by the feds. And so that's going to be interesting I will be a fly on the wall.
Sure.
When some of those results are coming through, the state will not be performing it. It will be the feds, but we'll be recipients of that information.
Wow. Okay. Well, that'll be interesting in the near future here for sure. So as we're winding down, there's a couple things, just some fun stuff I want to ask you. Number one is, what's your favorite spot in Juneau right now? Maybe a restaurant, coffee, anything.
Actually, before organization, we had one opportunity to go skiing at Eagle Crest. It was a Sunday, and there, as I recall, and went skiing. So that was almost my only day off since I've been down here. I've been a real just office junkie doing this, but we went skiing. So I would say that, and then there's just a number of awesome burgers that we found at a couple of different. I won't pick a favorite on that, but they're all good with a good glass of Juneau IPA. That are available down here.
Awesome. I'll ask you one more kind of fun thing. What is your most prized possession right now in your office?
I have to, I guess my laptop, my iPhone. Gosh, I don't know. I'll say that the stand-up desk that got lent to me that I'm using right now. I'll
look
say
at that.
Yeah, as just for sheer utility, I'll say that big old stand-up desk I inherited.
That's awesome. Well, James, I appreciate your time, man. I know you're busy, and I was excited that we were able to make this work out, but I know that you're going to do District 28 real proud. I love at some point, maybe in the next year or so, to have you on once or twice more, when you're even more into the trenches of what's going on. But I do appreciate your time, and I know that Anchorage and Alaska is really proud to have you representing us as a whole, and even your district. So thank you again, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Scott. Take care.
No problem. Take care. Well, that's it for us today. We are going to go ahead and close out here. But if you haven't had a chance, you can find Must Read Alaska on almost every platform: Twitter, Facebook, MeWe, YouTube, Parler, and it's all under the handle of Must Read Alaska, one word. So I encourage you to go follow us, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that. We love our listeners, readers, and our supporters. And if you want to continue to supporting this podcast and our ability to put out incredible content, Suzanne Downing and John Quick are on our Monday podcast, and I do the midweek one. You can go ahead and go to mustreadalaska.com and hit the donation button up at the top right. And that just helps ensure that we can keep putting out this content and having incredible guests like James and a lot of our people that represent us both in the local and state level. So again, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next week, and take care.